Thank you, Mr. Rosenstein, and I want to echo what you said. Most FBI agents, most law enforcement officers risk their lives and do a job to protect their country, and we appreciate them. But every now and then, things get off script, and that's what brings us here today. You signed a warrant application in June of, I think, 2017 to get the Carter Page warrant renewed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Have you looked at the Horowitz report?
Yes, I have. I have it with me, Senator.
If you knew then what you know now, would you have signed the warrant application?
No, I would not.
And the reason you wouldn't have is because Mr. Horowitz found that exculpatory information was withheld from the court. Is that correct?
Among other reasons, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
and somebody actually altered an email.
Correct.
Right, right. So there were 17 violations that Mr. Horowitz found, but I can't stress enough to the country that he found the most egregious of all. The dossier was the only reason the Carter Page warrant was issued to begin with. And in January 2017, the man who provided Steele with all the information told the FBI it was a bunch of garbage and they used it twice more. What kind of country is this? What happens to people who do that? Did you know that? You didn't know that, did you?
No, sir.
Do you think McCabe knew that?
I hope not, Senator. I do not personally know.
Was he in charge of the investigation?
Yes, he was.
Did he ever lie to you?
Mr. McCabe, I don't believe, Senator, that there were any occasions in which I identified that he lied to me.
Okay. Did he ever say anything, looking back, that is perplexing to you?
Well, that's a very broad question, Senator. I had a lot of
Do you
conversations.
think he was truthful to you?
Well, I believed, Senator, that Mr. McCabe was not fully candid with me. He certainly wasn't forthcoming. In particular, Senator, with regard to Mr. Comey's memoranda of his interviews with the president and with regard to the FBI's suspicions about the president, Mr. McCabe did not reveal those to me for at least a week after he became acting director, despite the fact that we had repeated conversations focusing on this investigation. And for whatever reasons, Mr. McCabe was not forthcoming with me about that. He has subsequently said publicly, in public comments he's made about the investigation, that his team had been leading up to certain important decisions for some time. From my perspective, Senator, they've been conducting this investigation for, I believe, approximately 9 months.
How much did you rely on Mr. Cabe's statements to sign the warrant? How much did that factor into whether or not you thought the warrant application was accurate?
With regard to the warrant application, Senator, I wouldn't say that I relied on Mr. McCabe's statements. I certainly had an understanding of what Mr. McCabe had told me, but the document stands for itself. It's 100 pages.
Right.
And I relied on what I understood to be in the application.
You did a scope letter, I think, August 2017, after you appointed Muller. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, sir.
Memorandum, I suppose. Who prepared that?
Well, Senator, I don't know exactly who prepared it. I know how it came about, if you'd like me to explain.
Yeah, please, very quickly.
I'm not sure how quickly I can do it. But I'd asked Mr. Muller to look at the whole, to look at all the potentially relevant matters.
Where did the information in the document come from? Did it come from the Muller team?
I believe it came from the Muller team, but it came to me through the team that I had set up to interface with the Muller team.
Okay, the team that you sent that interfaced with the Muller team, did they make the conclusions that you need to be looking at Papadopoulos and all these people for colluding with Russia?
I think it's important, Senator, to recognize, one of the reasons I was very reluctant to release these documents publicly is because we investigate people who are not necessarily guilty, and so I didn't have any presumption that these folks were guilty of anything.
Did you believe they committed a crime?
I believe that I understood that there was predication to investigate it. I didn't believe.
Where did that come from? Who gave you that predication?
Well, that came from information that came to me from the FBI, initially from.
Was it from Strzok and Page? Are those the people preparing all these documents?
I don't know who was preparing.
Were they in charge? Were they still the investigators for Mueller early on?
My understanding, Senator, is that Ms. Page and Mr. Strzok were working with
Okay.
the Mueller.
What input, if any, did they have into the information contained in the memo?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay. Who provided the information in the memo?
I'm sorry, which memo are we talking
The
about?
one where you lay out the
scope
scope of the investigation?
That came through discussions between Mr. Muller's team and.
Well, did anybody on your team recommend you look at Papadopoulos? Where did the idea that George Papadopoulos working with the Russians came from?
These matters, Senator, I believe were already open when I arrived.
Yeah,
in
the
April.
point is that they were open. These are the same people doing Crossfire Hurricane, and they gave you a document to sign, and here's my belief, that they prepared the document, that they defined the scope of their own investigation. Is that fair to say? That you were just a conduit for it?
Well, I'm relying on information that's coming up.
Yeah, well, you didn't do an independent investigation yourself, did you?
My job isn't to do the investigation.
No, you didn't do you basically relied on what they gave you. Is that fair to say?
Relied on the information that.
Yeah, just like you did with the warrant.
Correct.
Okay, so the same people that gave you the warrant application also gave you the scope investigation for Muller. So that's why we're here, to find out how much we can trust these people. Now, to appoint a special counsel, there's got to be evidence, criminal investigation of a person or matter is warranted. What was the crime that you were looking at?
So I think, Senator, it's important to understand, first of all, that's what's required under the regulation.
Right.
It's actually not required to appoint a special counsel that could be
Okay.
a crime.
Well, was there a crime being looked at or
In this
not?
particular case, yes.
What was the crime?
The original crime, underlying crime, was the Russian influence operation.
Okay, can you tell us what evidence existed that General Flynn was colluding with the Russians in May of 2017?
I don't, the evidence against General Flynn, first of all, Senator.
What evidence existed that General Flynn was colluding with the Russians in 2017, May of 2017?
I can't comment about that case, Senator, beyond what's in the
Did you
public
know
record.
that in January the 4th, 2017, the FBI field office said, we recommend that General Flynn be removed from Crossfire Hurricane?
No, I did not.
Okay. Would that have mattered if you had known that?
Yes.
Okay. Did you know that they had recordings of Mr. Papadopoulos somewhere overseas saying, no, I never worked with the Russians, words to the effect that if the campaign did, that would be treason? Did you know that existed?
No, I did not.
Okay, did you know that Carter Page, how many times did Carter Page meet with Donald Trump?
I don't know the answer to that, Senator.
Okay, how many times did Papadopoulos meet with Donald Trump?
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, I can tell you 0 in any meaningful way. The dossier claims that Manafort was, that Carter Page was a conduit at Manafort passing along Russian information. Are you aware of the fact that Carter Page has said numerous times, I never talked to Manafort?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So the point is, when you made this appointment, the people named in it, there's 0 evidence they were working with the Russians. 0. And this went on for 2 years. $25 million, and people had their lives turned upside down. That General Flynn, in January the 4th, 2017, the FBI agents who had been looking at him said they recommended he be dropped, and our good old buddy Strzok said, no, the 7th floor wants to look at him. If you had known that, would you have asked more questions?
Yes.
Okay. Anyway, thank you for your service. Knowing what you know now, do you have any reservations about making the Mueller appointment, given the fact that all the people named in this scope letter, there's like 0 evidence by May 2017 they were working with the Russians? Do you have any concerns at all?
I think, Senator, there are 2 issues. The first is whether the investigation was appropriate, and the second is whether it was appropriate to assign it to Mr. Mueller. And the decision that I made, obviously, was based on the information I had at the time. You need to make the decision.
I'm not
based on
arguing
what
with you
know at the
about
time.
assigning it to Mueller. I'm saying, was there a legitimate reason to believe that any of the people named in this letter were actively working with the Russians in August 2017?
In August 2017,
That's when you signed the memo.
my understanding, Senator, was that there was
What is
reasonable
it?
suspicion.
What was it?
Based in, and now again, Senator, the investigation is concluded, and these people were not conspiring with the Russians. The information available at the time
Well,
included,
why do we have the Muller investigation at all if we had concluded they weren't working with the Russians?
I don't believe we had concluded it at that time.
I'm saying in January the 4th, 2017, the FBI had discounted Flynn. There was no evidence that Carter Page worked with the Russians. The dossier was a bunch of garbage. And Papadopoulos is all over the place, not knowing he's being recorded, denying working with the Russians. Nobody's ever been prosecuted for working with the Russians. The point is, the whole concept that the campaign was colluding with the Russians, there was no there in August 2017. Do you agree with that general statement or not?
I agree with that general statement.
Thank you.